I want to talk about something not everyone has yet heard of, which is ENG. But before talking about ENG, which is what we call e-methane, synthetic renewable natural gas, let's step back, and we've heard a lot of comments in the previous panel. Why do we need to import hydrogen? It's very simple. We can make renewable energy as cheap as 10 euros per megawatt hour in sunny places. And the price of energy in Europe today is 150 euros per megawatt hour. So you may read headlines of negative prices, very cheap wind when it's windy, but if you take a baseload average, you have about 150 euros a megawatt hour. Now there's inflation, so we can't get back to 10. 10.4 actually is a record in Dubai. 13 is a European record for solar in Portugal. So in Europe, we use molecules to make electricity. And to make a molecule from the electricity made from molecules doesn't really make sense until the marginal price is based on a molecule. So we say PPWS, put the panels where it's sunny. Let's go and get the cheapest possible source of electricity. And if I can get solar energy at 10, or maybe today it's 20, and in Europe we have electricity at 150, even if there's some inefficiency in the making of the hydrogen, from an energy balance point of view, it's still incredibly efficient from an economic point of view, because the spread is so big. Of course, we can electrify many uses, we can connect the Middle East and North Africa and Scotland and Norway and Ireland, and a lot of cables will be built under the seas to connect the sunny and windy places with the demand. But the hard-to-abate sectors we know in this room and we hear about need hydrogen. And the import of hydrogen is just a lot cheaper than moving some of our factories to where it's sunny and windy. And if the mountain doesn't go to Mohammed, we bring Mohammed to the mountain, and the cost of importing hydrogen and transporting hydrogen is only around 10 euros per megawatt hour. So people, even before, talk about the challenges of hydrogen, the challenges of storing hydrogen, the challenges of moving hydrogen, the challenges of liquefying hydrogen. I think the biggest challenge with hydrogen is the hype. We've created a huge hype. I've written 4 books. This is my last book on hydrogen, called The Hydrogen Revolution. This came out a year and a half ago. And in this book, I say that it will take 15 years to get to 50 gigawatts of hydrogen electrolyzers. And when we hit that magic number, the cost of hydrogen gets to $1 a kilo, or $25 a megawatt hour. Why is that number important? Because that's when green hydrogen is cheaper than coal. We've worked with the Department of Energy in America. Yesterday, you may have seen they came out with their strategy. It's 1-1-1, $1 for 1 kilo in 1 decade. So as this book came out, we kind of were working with the Chinese government. By the way, the book sold 5 times more copies in China than in the US and Europe combined, just to say that the word hydrogen is very popular there. And when it was sold out on Amazon, my mother got very excited. We called Amazon to say, hey, it's sold out, my family can't buy any copies. And Amazon said they only bought 19 copies because the algorithm in Amazon thought hydrogen was very unpopular as a topic, and so no one was going to read this book. But in China, they also have this target of $1 a kilo. In India, they have this target of $1 a kilo. So all we should really be discussing in these forums is how do we get to $1 a kilo. So the good news is that since I wrote the book, I thought it was going to take 15 years. Now I think it's going to take 5 years. But this hype that we've created that drove some companies to have incredible stock market performances is also bad, because people think it's happening sooner, and people kind of underestimate the obstacles. The biggest obstacle to hydrogen is excitement and overexcitement that will lead to a lot of frustration, especially in the financial markets. And where is the frustration? The frustration is that hydrogen as such is not bankable. Some people Say, okay, it doesn't matter if it's not bankable, there will be subsidies. But if something is not bankable, it simply will not happen. All the projects need banks. And if you cannot make a product really bankable, there's no point in even starting. And as I look at the 566 hydrogen projects that are announced, almost 95% of them are not bankable. Because a bank doesn't know what to do with hydrogen. It's hard to insure hydrogen. It's hard to see a long-term immediate use for it. If you go and knock on companies' doors, I've signed in my last 7 years that I've been working on hydrogen, over 150 hydrogen sales term sheets. And I tend to skip the MOUs, I go direct to term sheet. Not one of them has gone from term sheet to contract. So a lot of customers are enjoying the price discovery, the technology discovery. A lot of customers really believe they will do it, but they're not ready to sign it because they don't know what to do with hydrogen. So we need to bring Mohammed to the mountain. We need to bring the hydrogen to the customers in a way that customers can endorse it, can use it today and tomorrow and this decade, without waiting for all these discussions we're having about the big pipelines, the chicken and egg, the new infrastructure. The most immediate way to bring hydrogen to customers is to convert it to natural gas. And I've reached this conclusion having invested more than $1 billion in hydrogen, buying electrolyzer companies. We were the first to put hydrogen in pipelines, the first to store hydrogen underground in my previous companies, the first to bring hydrogen to a pasta factory in southern Italy. We made the world's first hydrogen pasta. But these were all experiments. When you have to scale it up, I've reached a conclusion that the best option we have is to produce it at scale where it's sunny and windy, ideally where it's sunny and windy and you have subsidies, like in Texas. We announced last week a 50-50 project with Total Energies to build a $2 to $3 billion ENG project to produce green hydrogen and to merge the hydrogen. I'll go through the process with CO2, create synthetic renewable methane, exactly like biomethane. And then you have a product that you can magically just drop it in to the existing pipelines, the existing LNG, the existing ships, the existing factories. And then as these factories want to go carbon neutral themselves, they will give you back their CO2. And so you keep the CO2 in a loop. I'll explain what we mean. So this is not going to be the only solution. I believe ammonia will have great success in replacing the gray ammonia. I think methanol will have its own uses. I think ENG, though, is going to be the king of e-fuels. ENG, you can put it straight into a car. I was driving, courtesy of Sergio Marchionne, who was the CEO of Fiat. He told me when I was the CEO of SNAM, we need the internal combustion engine for some uses, for heavy trucking or for people who just want to travel huge distances. And in Italy, we now have 2 million cars running on CNG, compressed natural gas. And it takes about 500 to 1,000 euros to convert a diesel car to CNG or to ENG. It takes 0 to convert a steel plant from fossil natural gas to ENG. It takes 0 to convert a ship running on LNG. There's hundreds of container vessels running on LNG. To convert those to ENG costs 0. To convert our LNG terminal in Wilhelmshaven from fossil LNG to ENG costs 0. And it's completely carbon neutral. So let's go through the cycle. It's quite straightforward. The process is called Sabatier. Paul Sabatier won a Nobel Prize in 1912, so nothing new. If you put together CO2 and H2, you get CH4. It's an exothermic reaction. You get heat, you get water. A lot of people complain. They say, that doesn't make sense. You put H2 in, hydrogen in, you get H2O out. This is really inefficient. That's true from a mass balance point of view. But from an energy balance point of view, let's remember there's energy in the carbon. Let's remember all the fuels we use today are hydrocarbons, hydrogen and carbon. So carbon is horrible if it goes in the atmosphere. But if you use it in a carbon neutral way, it's actually a very useful delivery mechanism for hydrogen. So we go and produce it where it's sunny and windy and where there's subsidies. We heard from Charlotte the Australian subsidies are coming. The Middle East is pushing really hard on this, and the US, we know, has come out yesterday with their grand hydrogen strategy and the IRA and the infrastructure bill. And we bring it mainly to Wilhelmshaven. That's our heart of our operations, is building this terminal in Wilhelmshaven. So in Texas, solar and wind, we take local biogenic CO2 to start with, and over time we will bring the CO2 from Wilhelmshaven to Texas to merge with the CO2. Think about the ship. The ship is going from Texas to Wilhelmshaven with LNG. Today it's coming back empty. If we put CO2 on that same ship, it's getting a free ride, much cheaper than storing it. Why store it if you can use it, if it's such a climate-friendly hydrogen carrier? So the terminal will go green over time. We start with a small percentage of ENG as we scale this up, and then all of Wilhelmshaven, consistent with the German law, all the LNG will have to go to ENG. And if you look online, you will notice that METI, I have huge respect for METI. METI is the Japanese energy ministry. Japan has had to import energy since they started as an industrial nation because they don't have energy. They don't have a lot of land, they don't have a lot of sun, and that's why they import coal and gas via LNG. It's the world's biggest LNG market. Japan decided to go from LNG to ENG, and they have a firm target in their national strategy to go 90% ENG, starting in 2028, growing all the way to 90% by 2050. So by 2050, they'll have 90% ENG, 5% biomethane, and 5% pure hydrogen. This is decided. So I'm not saying anything new. We're going to apply the same logic to Wilhelmshaven. So, of course, it helps security of supply. It helps bringing prices down. What's really incredible that people who haven't done the math struggle to understand is that the cost of ENG today is competitive with fossil fuels. The simplicity, it sounds complex to build solar, to build wind, to build an electrolyzer, to build a Sabatier, to find the CO2. It sounds complex, but I've been in the oil and gas industry for 20 years. To drill a horizontal well in the North Slope of Alaska, 3 miles into the sea, where you have extreme cold and extreme heat in the summer, where you have ice, that's a lot more challenging. What we're doing is actually quite simple. And we're building this first module with Total, and then we can copy and paste and cookie cut that module. And as I said, the IEA is now talking about ENG, Shell is talking about ENG in their LNG strategy. Total has partnered with us, the Japanese government, and many Japanese companies are working on it. So hydrogen imported is a lot cheaper than hydrogen produced domestically. And the way to import hydrogen is to convert it into something, because it's really hard to liquefy it. And if we convert it to something that's useful and bankable and immediately storable and usable, I think that's a key enabler of the transition. And as we scale up, we have all the flexibility because the CO2 part is only 3% of our capex. So we have all the flexibility over time to go from ENG to pure hydrogen if the pipelines are built, if the factories are changed, if the technology finds a way to compress or liquefy pure hydrogen cheaper. I don't think we'll get there. I think ENG will stay for hundreds of years as the solution to move the sunshine and the wind from where it's sunny and windy to the factories. And this reminds me of the Roman aqueducts. If you come to Rome and you go to the Trevi fountain, the water in the fountain comes from an aqueduct called the Aqueduct of the Virgin. It was built 2,000 years ago. And the marginal cost of the water is zero, and that infrastructure is being amortized over 2,000 years. And the marginal cost of the sun in Australia and the wind offshore is zero. The marginal cost is zero. So we're building an energy system which is much, much cheaper, more resilient than today's. And I think this narrative has to make its way to the public, because we're all concerned about budgets and cost of the transition. The energy transition will deliver much cheaper energy, much more predictable energy, and much more stable and geopolitically spread energy. So I could go on for another half hour, but I've run out of time, and I think we have a few seconds to take questions, if any, from the floor.
First of all, thanks a lot. We have actually time to take one question, I would say. And this reads as follows. Maybe we can see it here on the screens as well. ENG emits CO2, it says here. So if the world moves to ENG only instead of ramping up H2 direct use, we finally won't decarbonize. How can you ensure a true circularity?
Yeah, this is something, it takes a little bit of an intellectual effort to fully get it. The Japanese explain it very nice on a video from Tokyo Gas and Osaka Gas. ENG requires CO2, has a CO2 input, which is as much as a CO2 output. So our preferred use is to give ENG to a customer, he gives us back the CO2, and we use the CO2 in a circular way as a milk bottle. That's our preferred option. What the Japanese are saying is, if you can take someone else's CO2 whilst I build up my carbon capture technology in Japan, because Japan will have to build export terminals. It's more complex to get CO2 from Japan to Texas than to take CO2 in Texas. They say it's climate neutral, because I've taken CO2 that would have gone in the atmosphere, and I use it to transport the hydrogen. And I release the CO2 back in the atmosphere, but it's the same CO2 I've captured. So the product is, by definition, by chemical definition, carbon neutral. Now, if that happens, the Japanese government and the US government at the United Nations UNFCCC need to agree who gets the carbon credit for that captured CO2. The Japanese government says, I have that credit because I paid for the capture with my purchase of the ENG. And the US could say, well, that's captured in the US territory. So, you know, at worst, it will be 50-50. But for sure, ENG is carbon neutral. That's the science, that's the chemistry, that's the fact. People who say, oh no, but CO2 is emitted, it's emitted, but it's captured. It has to be captured. If I don't capture it, I can't produce the ENG. So like, anyone who has doubts, call us, write to us. We need to get the science right, because it's crystal clear. And a lot of the NGOs and the climate scientists agree with us.
That's a lovely final word.